Hey, what's up guys, this is Liam or Weagle on Clickheads, and today we're going to be talking about a very interesting interview with Seagull and Morello from Riot over on Seagull's Twitch channel. There's a lot of stuff involved here, so I've kind of tried to break it down. We've got stuff about game balance, new content, new agents, how guns work, all kinds of new content and different things. So I want to start up with balance because I think that's the thing most of you want to know, right? And that is what is going on with Raze. We've also going to have some potential changes to Sage as well. So none of the balance changes are 100% yet, but they wanted to give us some insight into what they're looking at with Raze. And the first one, of course, is her grenades. And the most simple thing I think that a lot of us thought is what they're also looking at. And that is either giving her less grenades or making the radius smaller on the cluster grenades so that it's easier to avoid them. This also comes with the potential of the sound cues being changed so that it's much more obvious where her rocket launcher ultimate is going to come from. So it looks like even though they think she's fairly balanced anyway, they may tweak this based on player feedback. Now it's actually interesting because Raze and Sage are the oldest characters in the game, and a lot of the other kits of course have been based around playing with them from the start. So it's still a hero that they're not convinced is OP, and this exact thing did happen in Overwatch with characters that people thought were OP that when gameplay got more refined actually weren't used anymore, and I think that they're trying to avoid that. But it looks like for now they may tweak these values just to see what happens. And for those of you out there that may or may not think Sage's wall is OP, they're actually trying to spend a lot of their time fixing things, especially with that wall, as it's getting people to unintended locations and allowing people to get out of the map even in some places. But in terms of actually nerfing it, they're contemplating whether they should make it more expensive, as it's really strong at closing off a lane, especially in pistol round. And in fact, one of the most direct things they are doing is in the next patch they're going to be nerfing the wall so that you can knife it down a lot easier. This is to make it easier, of course, in pistol round to get past the wall, because currently it takes a whole team shooting into the wall to get through it in a few seconds, and they want to make the knife deal double damage to it. So that'll make that a little bit more easier to deal with. In terms of balance patches past this though, it does seem that their main focus is actually going to be on fixing current issues rather than changing any of the kits, and they seem fairly happy where most of the utility and damage values currently lie. Now, one way, of course, to balance a game, especially like this, is to do with bans, and Seagull asked if there would be bans coming to the game so that some characters could be banned in competitive play, whether it's to get an advantage or whether they're too good on a certain map. And even though it's something that they're currently not working on, they have mentioned that in a distant future where there's a lot of characters, this may be a possibility, but with the amount that they're going to have at launch, it's not something that they're currently considering. Another big part of balance is of course the weapons, and Morello was asked why the developers seem to use the Phantom a lot more than the Vandal in the show match between them and the streamers. And he went on to say that the Vandal's main intention is to actually kill people at long distance in one shot, as the headshot damage carries a lot further than the Phantom does. And the Phantom is much better all round. A medium range is a lot easier to aim with, and of course control spray, and that makes spray control much easier. So it's going to depend on the maps, and I'm sure as we get more maps, the Vandal or the Phantom may be more meta depending on the lanes. And they're currently happy with both of these weapons, but they do want to keep them both being used going forward into the future. Now next up, we've got new content, new agents, and some agents that may or may not make it to the game. First up, how many agents are we going to get at release? And this still seems to be unchanged. Now, he didn't want to give an exact number, but Seagull did raise that someone had mentioned from Riot there would be 12 agents and 4 maps on release. Now, although Morello didn't confirm this would be the exact number, he said that that's what they're aiming for, and it just depends on how things go by launch, if there's a lot of changes that they may need to make to them characters or already released ones, and maps. And of course, there's the whole COVID-19 situation, which can definitely cause some issues before release. So although they're aiming for 12 agents and 4 maps, that might not be exactly what we see. Now, competitive play is supposed to be coming very, very soon, and we still don't have an exact date. but it should be coming out within the next week or so in the beta. And Morello was asked if the rule set would be the same in the new content and of course the current quick play that we have. And right now it seems like the modes are basically going to be exactly the same, but one of them is going to be the competitive mode. Now currently, even though there is MMR in the quick play system, if you queue and you have a high MMR, to balance teams out, it gives you really low ranked players. That probably isn't going to happen in competitive, and I'm expecting people at a higher elo to actually wait a little longer for queues, but it's a free to play game, so I can't imagine that's going to make a big difference. But in terms of how the rule sets will change, like will they hide money and ult states from the enemy team, that is also going to remain identical in quick play and competitive currently, although it's something that they may change in the future if they feel like it affects the competitive integrity. Now, they had some interesting things to say about new agents and the fact that some of the characters they've worked on in the past will maybe surface one day and some of them are definitely going to stay dead. For example, Morello spoke specifically about a prototype of a character he made called Crusader who had a shield and a melee skill, and that this character would definitely never surface, and this isn't some kind of an Easter egg. It just simply didn't work in the game, and we will get a little more onto the nerdy stuff when we get past this new content section here, but they were very concerned with the melee skill and the shield in the game, and they just were like, that's not happening. But one thing that they do with the agents is very similar to Overwatch as well, where they're constantly shifting abilities around from different characters. So even though Breach has currently got his stun move and the flashbang, of course, they actually predate him as mechanics in the game and were on different heroes originally, and now, well, they're on Breach or Phoenix or whatever other characters they decide to move them abilities to. Omen was originally called Phantom and actually had a completely different skill set from what he ended up having. So even when they talk about certain abilities that will or will not be in the game, they're contemplating putting a deafen in the game, which could be either sound or it could even be like you can't see the map and things like that. That might be on one character in development, but it might end up on a completely different one a year from now. And when it comes to adding this new content that I'm talking about, they have confirmed that they're not doing it right now. This is just stuff that they'll bring out in the future, and that their primary focus is on maintaining the integrity of the game rather than adding stuff. And that even comes down to character skins, which is something that he has now said they really want to do character skins, but they're very concerned it will affect the competitive integrity. And I'm assuming this is when it comes to things like clear field of vision, like you know what you're shooting at. And it also comes down to hitboxes too. This happens in many games, and a lot of competitive games try to avoid it, where if someone's got a different skin, their hitbox might be slightly different in size, whether it be visual or actually different, and that can cause some problems when it comes to a competitive game. I do think that we'll see character skins, however, sometime, but I just don't think it's going to be at release. So now I want to dive into some of the nerdiest stuff, whether it's defense being too strong or randomness of gun sprays. So the first thing is the maps. They brought up in the interview that a map like Split is extremely defender-sided, and would they be looking to change either heroes up on the map or a different half system so that the team on attack didn't feel that they were at a disadvantage. Now, I could actually argue this a little differently, because if you're on attack first and then you manage to pull it back to a draw in the second half, well, the extra round you get at the end, the 13th round, you would be at an advantage because you would still be on defense, which I think will need a tweak somewhere down the line, or at least some kind of best of where you keep swapping rounds and you've got to win a certain amount of rounds. I would almost guarantee that will come out, although they didn't mention it in the interview. And in answer to that question, what are they going to do about this? They are not looking to change the balance of the game, rather the lanes on the map, because they're very happy with the core game, and clearly on some maps it's not as bad as others. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a tweak to Split at some point, as mid control on that map on defense is just super important. It's pretty much the only win condition, whereas on the other maps there are different plays you can make, take? Well, split. You better win mid and you better do well on defense or you're going to be in for a rough time. They also spoke a little bit about gun sprays, and currently Riot are very happy with the way that the gun sprays work, and it's also got a secret intention that Seagull brought up in the interview that this developer wasn't even fully aware of, and that is that when you fully spray with the guns in this game, they eventually become random. There's a small pattern at the start and then it randomly goes left to right, and the gun barrel itself actually moves left and right slightly before the bullets do. So what Riot have gone for here is to create this random but manageable if you're good enough and knowledgeable enough in the situation to manage gameplay that is extremely difficult, and I don't know how anyone's ever going to refine it, but it's something that they're very happy about. It's a dynamic aim mechanic. Even though it is technically random whether it's going left and right, if you are quick enough and good enough, you will be able to dynamically control that so that spray isn't technically random when you get like past your 7th or 10th bullet, whatever it is on whatever gun. So that's a crazy mechanic, and I don't know who's going to be good enough to use it, but it is in the game. And one thing that they're very concerned about, and I've spoke about competitive integrity a lot in this video already, but that is actually power creep. They're being very careful right now with what heroes they put in the game, and there's even some characters that they really like that they've created that will never make it to the game. And when I spoke about this stuff in the last interview they did, I said that I could tell they were referencing Overwatch a lot without saying it. Well, in this interview, Morello actually straight up calls out Overwatch and says the abilities and the characters in that game feel amazing, but in a nice way said that it completely ruins any competitive integrity because the characters feel too good, and that in this game they would rather the game plays well than every character feels easy or perfect to play all of the time. Something like Brigitte, for example, that came out in Overwatch that ruined the game for basically a year, had a shield and a melee that really didn't fit the game. And if you go back to this video 5 minutes ago, we were talking about the Crusader character with that exact description for this game that will never be released. So that is very good news. If you don't know, just so you know, that is very, very good news. And they are open to putting some stronger mechanics in the game, potentially down the line. But again, right now, they're just trying to make sure they have the core game exactly where it should be. And this brings it to pretty much the last big part of the interview, and that is mirrored characters. They were asked that if there was enough characters in the game, will they eventually have some characters only be attack and some only be defensive? And basically the short answer is no. And the long answer is that if you think about someone like Sage or Cypher, who are incredibly good on defense, especially Cypher, but when you get him onto attack, his utility is very difficult to leverage unless the enemy are pushing on you, which generally they're not when they're defending, other than some cheeky rounds here or there. And that Riot currently like the idea of having to get that defensive utility to a point somehow, get the bomb down so that that defensive utility can then be used. And if you only had attack and then only defensive heroes, that might actually take away some of the negatives of taking characters that are really strong on one side, and they currently really like that counterplay. So lots of interesting stuff, guys, in my opinion anyway. We just hit 20,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notified when the videos go live. And be sure to drop a like because it helps us out and lets us know you're enjoying the content. Of course, links will be in the description as always. Have yourselves a fantastic day. Take care and peace, people.